Hello everyone, welcome to another video in this full stack Flutter development series. In this video we'll be looking at states management and we'll be using the Cubit library to handle states in our application. Now the Cubit library is a lightweight version of the Flutter bloc library and it is created by the same developer, Felix Angelov. Now if you are familiar with the provider library or the provider pattern, then Cubit will be very easy to follow as it is very similar to the provider pattern, where it basically get rid of the events and use methods that are created within a single Cubit. In order to get started, we first need to install these packages. So we need the Cubit package and the Flutter Cubit package. We also need for this video the equatable package and for testing the Mockito package. So we need to get those up and running to get started. Also, as you can see here, I have added my auth module as a part of this application. So now I have access to my auth module and to reference those files that I expose from this module so that the Flutter application may access whatever I exported or exposed as we go through this tutorial. So the first thing I want to do is to go into my lib folder, which is not the auth lib but the lib folder which is associated with the Flutter application. And inside this folder I am going to create another folder and I'm going to call it states management. And in here I'll have all my states or my qubits and their states, and I'm going to create one for auth. So the first thing I'll create is the auth state. And this is very similar to what we are accustomed using the bloc library. So I'm going to create some states for my authentication and I'm going to call it auth state. I am going to extend equatable. So that's my abstracts class. And then I am going to have different states. So I'll have an initial state. This will extend auth state. And because I am using the equatable library, I will override the prop method and return here an empty array. So that's my initial state. I'll also have a loading state. Same thing as which is extending my auth state, and this will also override this method here. So I'll quickly copy that. And then I'll have what I'll call a auth success state. And this success state will have a token, since whenever there is successful authentication, then a token will be returned. And then I'll add this to the prop method here from equatable. So as you can see here is that my token there is no reference to this. It is undefined. And even if I try to import it, it cannot be accessed, since it is basically a part of the auth module and is not exposed to any external modules. So in order for us to get access to this, we'll have to export it. So inside of our auth module, we'll have to go, and here we'll have to tell it to export or to expose inside my source, inside my domain, expose the token. So now if I go back to my state, now I have access to it from the auth package. So now we have a physical separation so that we cannot accidentally import anything from our auth library that is not explicitly exposed to the outside world by us. So I'll also create a error state to return an empty array, and I'll also create a sign out success state, since we'll be handling signing out events also. Now these are the states that will be handled by our auth Cubit. Let me quickly remove all of this to get rid of that error. So now that we have our state, or our different states that will be handled by our Cubit, we can move inside of our state management again, and we're gonna add a class, and we're gonna call it auth Cubit. We're gonna say class auth Cubit, and this will extend Cubit, and it will be of type auth state. I am going to make this into a relative path. Now I'll create this controller which has as its initial state the auth Cubit, but it won't accept it. It will just, for the inside the superclass, it will create the initial state. Now inside of this auth Cubit, whereas in the bloc library you would use events and listen to streams of events, here it works just like the provider package. So where you have methods, and then in those methods you can emit or send the different states. So inside, I'm going to create a sign in method which accepts a iSign-in service, iAuth service rather. It will be an async method, and here it's gonna say make a call, and I'm gonna call the result to the auth service sign in method. And then when it is finished, it will emit the necessary state. So in this case, at the end, it will emit the auth success state and pass in the token right here. Again, we have not exposed the auth service, the iAuth service, so we have to go here and we have to say export from our source, from our domain, or auth service contract. Now we can import it from our auth package, and there we have it. So now when this method is called, the first thing is to emit the loading state. So we'll emit the loading state, and then we'll reach out to the auth service to sign in, and then when that is finished, we'll emit the auth success state along with the token received from the auth service, or the auth sign-in method. Now this method, this emit, I am going to refactor, and I'm going to extract it as a method and call it start loading, since I know that I'll be reusing this for different methods in this Cubit. I am also going to wrap this auth success state. I am going to wrap this in a method also, and I'm going to call that method set result of auth state. Here I'm going to pass in this result, so I'm going to say result of type token result. I know I have to import that result from the async library. Now I can pass in the result here to be processed by this function. So this function will check first if the result is an error. So if it is an error, then if the result is an error, that means that the error is not null. Then we are going to emit here an error state. So in this case, we're going to emit an error state, and here we can pass in the error message, but we'll have to modify the error state to say that there should be a message. So final string message it would be best if this was an array of messages, but for now I am just gonna leave it as a string. And then inside the constructor I'll accept that message. So now we'll pass in the error that was passed. So we'll emit, and then we'll return. And if there is no error, then we'll emit the token here with the success state. And in this case it would be in the value. So as value, set the value. So in our sign-in method, we will start loading, then we'll get the result, and then we'll set the state based on the result. So that is the sign-in method for our auth Cubit. Now for our sign out method, it is very similar to the sign-in method. We'll create our sign out, which again will accept the service. Here I'm using constructor method injection rather than constructor injection, and we'll see why later. Again, start loading, then the result equals to the auth service sign out, and there needs to be a token here, because in order to sign out we need to pass in the token. And I'm going to say if the result as a value, if there is a value, meaning that it signed out successfully, then what I want to do is to delete the token from the device and then emit a success state. So in this case, I will have some local store. For example, the shared preferences or keychain for iOS. I have some local store that store the token when the user successfully signs in. So now I want to delete from that local store that token. And also after deleting, I want to emit the success state or the auth sign out, rather the sign out success state, right? Else, in this case, if there was an error or user wasn't signed out successfully, I'll just emit that error. So I'll say error state, and I'll pass in an error message, error signing out. So now we need a local store to first of all fetch the token from the sign out. So here token the token needs to come from the same local store. So I'll say local store fetch, and that will fetch the token that will be passed to the sign out method, and then that token will be deleted from the local store. So in order to create that local store, I will create an interface. Here inside my lib folder, I'll create another folder called cache. And inside that, I will create a local store interface or contract. So I say abstract class I local store, and I'll have this method fetch and also delete. This delete will accept a token, and fetch will return a token. So there is our local store abstract class. Then here I will inject that local store into this Cubit. So I'll say I local store, make it into a final variable, then this local store. Now we have access to our local store to fetch the token and to delete the token. Now for our sign up method, this will accept a I sign up service and also a user that I have not created yet. Again, it will start loading first, then it will call the sign up method from the sign up service. Sign up service, sign up. But this service is not exposed to our application. So again, let us go into the auth module and say export source domain and our sign up service. Back inside of our Cubit, now our sign up service is available, and our sign up method is available with the name, the email, and the password. And we need to create a user. So again, inside of our application lib folder, we'll create another folder called models, and inside here we'll create a user model. So class user, this user will have a name, and email and password. Email, password. And I'm going to make all these required fields. Import that from foundation. So now we've created a user. We just need to import that user. And I'm going to use relative path here. So now we can get from our user what is required by this sign up method. So in this case, user name, user email, user password. And then we can send the result to the set auth state method for result. And now there we have our Cubit. Now there is something here that I would like to point out, that for sign in and sign up for all these methods, I am using the auth service instead of the sign in use case. And you might wonder why. So the thing is that I have created those use cases here, but based on the nature of these email and Google Auth services, they basically behave as a use case in and of themselves. So these use cases really in this context is unnecessary and is an unnecessary layer of abstraction where I can simply access the email or the Google Auth using the interface, the contract, that I can easily inject any one of those in these methods and it will work. And this is the beauty of building modular applications that are not tightly coupled. You can easily switch out parts and there is no technical debt. The maintenance cost is very low. So in this case, I can simply get rid of all these use cases and use the auth service as it is, and there will be no issue, no necessary refactorings, and no great change in the code base. So I won't be using the use cases and I'll soon delete them. I will be directly injecting any one of the auth service, whether it is email, whether it is Google, or further down the line, whether we choose to add Facebook, Twitter, whatever OAuth service that we might choose to implement, we can simply inject it in any one of these methods, including the sign-up service, and it would work. So there we have our auth Cubit. Now, as usual, we like to write tests for everything. So I am going to write some tests, but before that, I want to provide a way that conveniently gives the requested service. So if I want a email service, I ask for that. If I want a Google sign-in service, I'll ask for that. And so I am going to go back inside my auth library, and here inside my infrastructure layer, I am going to create another folder, and I'm going to call it managers, and I'm going to create a auth manager. Now the purpose of this manager is to simplify the creation of the service that we require, whether it is an email service or a Google service or a Facebook service. So it's basically behaving like a factory. So this manager will accept the API as the interface. So we'll inject the API inside of our manager, and then we'll create methods to return the services that we have. So in this case, I'm going to say get Google, and this will return a Google Auth service. And it will pass in the API. So whenever we have this manager, we can ask this manager to say, hey, give me the Google sign-in service. And there is one also for email, but this one will accept a few parameters. So this one will accept the email, and the password. Then it will say, I will create the email auth here. So create the email auth service, pass in the API. But since this service needs some credential to operate, to sign in, then I am going to set the credential to what is passed in. So in this case, the email and the password. And then I'll return this service. I'm also gonna make these required. So now we have our manager that we can ask for the necessary service, and it will return that service to us. Also, what I want to do is to refactor our email service. In this case, inside of our adapters, where we have email here, I want to take away the sign out service to make it strictly just an auth service, sign up rather. And I'm going to remove this method from the email, and I'm going to create a separate service for that. So I'm going to say sign up service. This service will be used directly by our auth Cubit for sign up purposes, and then the email service strictly for sign in and sign out. So class sign up service, this will implement the I sign up service, and create that method. I'll paste the method here. And we'll inject the API. And now we have our sign up service separate from our sign in and signing out services. So now we have those separated and ready to be accessed by our auth Cubit. Now I want to write some tests to test this Cubit, but the video is getting a bit long, so I'll save that for another time, or you guys can attempt to write those tests if you so desire. But we are going to stop here for today, and thank you guys for watching. We are building out our application. It is coming together nicely, and at the end we'll have a authentication module that is working correctly and that is used in our Flutter application when we create our auth screens and pages and tie everything together. So thank you again guys for watching, and see you in the next one. Again, the code is on GitHub, you can find it there. And remember to like, share, subscribe if you find these videos helpful. So see you in the next one, and thank you.